Watches collectors regret selling and why it keeps happening. Every serious watch collector has at least one watch they regret selling. Sometimes it's about the money, sometimes it's a personal connection, sometimes it's both. Using myself as an example, I sold the first watch I ever bought myself. I do regret it. It was a Breitling Chronomat, and I would love to be able to buy it back, but it's long gone. And if you've been in this space long enough, you've either already experienced this or it's coming at some point. Hopefully we can help you avoid it with this show, because no matter how experienced you are, everyone makes at least one of these mistakes. So let's start with the most common one. And for many people, it's their first real watch. Not the one you get as a kid, not something you're gifted early on, but the first watch you actually worked on purchasing. This is the one that got you into watches. Maybe it was your first big boy piece. And on paper, it usually doesn't matter. It's not the most expensive piece. Mine was a Breitling Chronomat, not that expensive in the grand scheme of things. It's not that it's rare. It's not that it's something other collectors are chasing. But to you, or in my case, to me, it was everything. It was my first big boy piece. It's the watch that started the whole thing. And what happens is, as people move up, they start upgrading. They trade for something bigger or better, or maybe just more expensive. Maybe Breitling to Rolex, or Rolex to AP, or AP to Patek. And the first watch gets sold along the way, or the first watch that's meaningful to you gets sold along the way. And almost every time, at some point later on, they or we or us, we wish we still had it. And not because of the watch itself, but because of what it represents. And you can replace the watch, but you can't replace that moment or like milestone in your life. The next one is where things start to get a little bit hurtful financially. This is the watch someone sells, and then not long after it gets discontinued, or once that happens, everything kind of changes. Supplies tighten, demand goes up, prices move up, and now you're looking at the same watch you used to own at a completely different price. We've seen this happen over and over again, too much to be honest with you. And the worst part is, when you sold it, there was no signal, there was nothing obvious telling you. It just felt like the right time. And maybe a few months later, maybe a few years later, you realize you were on the wrong side of that decision. That is one of the toughest ones to really deal with, because it's not just emotional, it's emotional and it's financial. Now, third one, and this one's where very clear about with clients prior, is if a watch was given to you for something like a wedding or an anniversary or a major milestone, we always advise the clients don't sell it. For instance, if someone works with my team or I and says, I want to sell you this watch, and we typically ask, where did this watch come from? Just because we're doing our due diligence. And they say, well, my wife gave it to me for my wedding. We say, are you still married to your wife? And they say, yes. We say, it's not in our best interest to say this, but you don't want to sell this watch. Why? Because your wife's going to get very upset, and that could play a huge part into your life moving forward. So if it's like a wedding gift or an anniversary gift or a major life event gift, you don't want to sell that watch because of the repercussions. And we do advise our clients that all the time. And it's not in our best interest, but it's in the client's best interest. And in our opinion, that's what's more important. Just keep those pieces, because at the end of the day, the watch isn't just a watch. It's tied to a moment, a person, a memory, a milestone. You can always go out and buy the same reference again, but it will never be the same watch that's meaningful, and the meaning doesn't transfer. Once it's gone, it's gone. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want a pissed off wife on my case because I sold a watch for an anniversary or a wedding. But the next one's simple, but it doesn't happen more than people think. It's selling at a loss. And this usually comes down to timing and patience. Someone buys a watch, the market shifts, maybe it cools off, maybe it dips, and instead of holding it, they panic sell. They want to get out of it. They don't want to lose on the watch, but in fact, they end up doing so. And a lot of times they could have just waited just a little bit. The outcome could be very different. This one's tough because it's like avoidant kind of. But in the moment, people don't really think that way. They just kind of react and they end up losing a bunch of money. And as dealers, we don't like facilitating that, but it's part of our job. And we do see it sometimes too often, but not as much as other examples. Now, let's talk about a very specific group of buyers. Anyone who bought watches from 2020 to 2022. That was a very different market. That was post-COVID market. Prices were hundreds of percent higher and demand was high because everybody had government cheese and everything was moving fast. And a lot of people entered the watch market during that time. And at that time, it felt normal. It felt like that was just where prices were. I mean, shoot, we were selling Submariners for almost $30,000. You know, a brand new Submariner today on the secondary market's going to cost you 15 to 16, just to kind of put it into perspective. But what we've seen since then is a big correction. Some of those same watches trade much lower today. So now you have people looking back at what they paid, and those watches are worth much less now. And the regret isn't just selling, it's realizing the timing of when you bought into the market and when you're selling back into the market. And then the last one, and this one always gets people talking. There are watch collectors who regret selling, and then there are watches people regret buying in the first place. And if there's one brand that everybody regrets, it's Hublot. Hublot tends to come up in this conversation for everybody, and a lot. And not everyone agrees, but enough collectors feel this way. It's worth mentioning that there's a pattern, and trust me, I was a collector and bought Hublot too. Whether it's resale value or long-term appeal or just how taste changes over time, it's one of those brands that people look back and say, I probably wouldn't do that again. At the end of the day, every collector has a story like this, a watch they wish they kept, a decision they wish they can take back if they could. And usually it's not just about one thing. It's a mix of timing, emotion, experience, and that's just a part of collecting. But if there's one thing that everyone pretty much agrees upon, it's a Hublot is worth about 60 to 70% less as soon as you buy it. So be careful. But the real question is, what's the one watch you regret selling? For me, I would love to know. And for me, I would also be very blatantly honest and vulnerable that I regret selling my first big boy piece. Tell me what you regret selling and tell us a story. We're interested. But again, my name is Chris, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.